Well, welcome to everybody. If you're new, if you're old, and if you guys can't see me, maybe scoot over a little bit because I'd love to see all your faces. All you. So, little bit about bhakti. Bhakti. I love this definition of bhakti. That bhakti. Okay, so the word bhakti it comes from the Sanskrit root bhaj, which means to offer your heart or to love and to. It's sort of more than just worship. It's about offering the heart. And what I love this definition that an offering of the heart and it's a softening of the heart. It's like a melting of the heart. And it's another definition that I love that's given by one great saint that it's meditation that's been saturated with love. And so, yeah. And it's about bhakti sounds like, okay, it's the word from India, so it sounds like it might be sectarian. But to me, bhakti is really about the essence of all the religions. So, you have people who are like about the externals of religion, and they might go to a church or a temple or a mosque. But then you have the people in all the religious traditions who want to go deeper, who want to find what the essence is. So to me, it's kind of like by any name, it's about going to the essence, which is opening the heart, which is about offering the heart in love to divinity by any name. So we love the word Krishna, the name Krishna. Krishna means the most attractive person, or the name Govinda, the one who attracts things that wander, like our senses, our minds. But any name works, because the names of divinity are as infinite as the waves on the ocean. And just like the sun in the sky, in Mexico they say El Sol, somewhere else they say names of God are in. And all over the world, the holy books all over the world say, celebrate the name of God. The Bible says, make a joyful noise unto the Lord. Praise the Lord with loud cymbals and drums. That's in the Bible, right? Cymbals, drums. Whoa, we do that. So yeah, it's kind of everywhere, and it's about going to the essence and opening the heart to love. So that's my little definition I would give. It's meant to be without discrimination, and it's meant to be accessible for everyone, everywhere, without discrimination. Because that divinity, that supreme person we call Krishna, is only accepting the sincerity of our hearts. It doesn't matter whether you stand up, bow down, do this, do that. It's about offering the sincerity of your own heart. And that's the only thing that God by any accepts. It's not about, acquiring this or that, or knowledge or renunciation, all those things. On the path of bhakti, those things can be helpful, but sometimes they can also be harmful. If I get like really proud that, I'm, such a renounced person, I'm only eating once a day, or I've got such vast knowledge, I give these great classes. No, it's not about that. It's about the humility of the heart and offering the heart. So I think that's, that's essential. That's what attracts me. And I think that's real for all of us. That's, what can we love? Where, what is that? That's anyone. Any of you ever see the show Oliver? Where's the one tree? So I think everyone everywhere is looking for that, to be loved and to love for who we really are, right? Beyond the games, beyond all the craziness, we want to exchange love for authentic. And that's what bhakti is. So that's a little bit about bhakti. A little bit about kirtan. So the process of bhakti, so I was talking about offering the heart. So it's all about like a call and a hearing and a calling out, and then a hearing or response. And that's what this process of kirtan is. So it's about calling the name of God, and one person who's leading the kirtan. Kirtan means to praise. It's basically praise, right? So the person who's leading the kirtan will be calling out, and then the community, which means all of us in the room, will respond. So it's about calling and then waiting to hear that response. So it's about opening the heart through hearing, through hearing. So yeah, call and response. The whole process of bhakti is really call and response. Whether I'm chanting and using singing, we also chant on beads. That's another type of chanting that we do. Maybe someone can do that. I hear some beads rattling around right now. So maybe some of you do that, but the quiet process is called japa. It's like Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna, Hare Ram. I'll just say that my first introduction to that was when I read a book about a Russian pilgrim. I was like maybe 12 or 13, and I was really addicted. I don't know if any of you have read this author, J.D. Salinger, but I was totally addicted to J.D. Salinger, and he mentioned a book called The Way of the Pilgrim, which was about, okay. So I've found this book, and it was about this Russian pilgrim, and he was just wandering around Russia, and his question was, is it possible to live in incessant prayer, to always be praying? And he got this instruction that by saying the name of God. And so he used to chant what was called the Jesus prayer, which they still do in the Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox, Russian, Greek, Ukrainian. So Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. And he would walk all through Russia chanting this, and his only possessions were a loaf of bread. He was like my ideal guy. Here I'm growing up in the suburb of Chicago, but he's my ideal guy. So he had a loaf of bread, a bag of salt, and the name of God. And what I remember from the book is that he said that eventually it became synchronized with his heartbeat, which was so beautiful. So I would be at school and I'd be swinging on the swings and I'd be chanting, hello. I'd be chanting this, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. So, I feel like that's how I came to the path of bhakti, which is all about this loving exchange, with the name of God, celebrating the name of God, praising like any name, right? We say Krishna, there it is up there. We say Krishna. Krishna means the all-attractive person. Rama means the highest eternal pleasure. And Hare is the feminine. So this mantra means mind deliverance. And this particular mantra is very special because it's got the divine feminine and the divine masculine together in this combined in the mantra. And when we say Hare, it's asking for the blessings of the divine feminine Radharani to beg Krishna to. So it's like, how in the Catholic Church so many people love Mary and they feel like even John Lennon, who's not even known as a particularly spiritual person, but he wrote that beautiful song, Mother Mary, let it be, let it be. So people are drawn that, the divine feminine is more accessible. Right? So this mantra, we approach Krishna through Radharani. So that's a little bit of, want to say anything much? To say a few prayers before beginning. Om Gyananjana Salakaya Shri Chaitanya Manavistam Stapidam Swayam Rupakadam Namam Padaya Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prajari Shishasunivari Karoti Vacharam Yakripastamam Vande Shishram Panchakapataru Yascha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Thank you all so much for the beautiful time. Beautiful. enthusiasm.
Well, thank you for leading us.
Thank you for leading us. Yeah, it's always so great when you hear women playing the gunga so fantastic. I think there are a few women who are drummers, right? Barbara, you're a drummer. Are you a drummer?
Yeah.
Miss Barbara?
Yes,
That's
she
Barbara.
is.
Are you?
She just doesn't know it yet.
Oh. Well, that's Barbara over there is a drummer.
Yeah.
And Teresa, are you a drummer too?
And Bernie.
And Wendy's a drummer.
Yes, Wendy is.
Anybody else here like to drum? You? Getting there. Good. This is Jenna. Getting there. Okay. So, yeah, I wanted to speak a little bit tonight about the inclusive nature of bhakti. And I just wanted to say to begin that this bhakti community is a gigantic, gargantuan international community that's all over the world. And bhakti is really meant to welcome people from all different cultures, religions, ethnicities. And it's a big, big family. And I wanted to begin by saying something that, yeah, any of you have this experience that sometimes you might have a relative. Okay, so you're talking about a big family, right? And sometimes you might have some members of your family, some relatives, maybe they show up at Christmas or Thanksgiving. And, sometimes they say something at the Christmas dinner or the Thanksgiving dinner that's like kind of bigoted or racist, or some kind of comment about people who are different from themselves or different from the family, have a different religion, and, sometimes it's because they're from the old country, but it's kind of like fill in the blank, whatever old country it is. It may be Italy, it may be India, it may be Poland, it may be Vietnam. But, sometimes people from the old country have kind of old country values and views that are like, kind of make you cringe when in front of all the people at the Thanksgiving table, or maybe in front of everybody at the temple even, will say something that's like, oh, no, So I just really want to, can you relate to what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Can you guys relate? Okay. So I just wanted to really apologize for that. For that. But, when you have a big international family, you're going to have people like that. And everybody, and I feel like we talk about this a lot in Intimate, and I talk about this a lot. We really feel that our world, our community is enriched by our diversity. We're not impoverished by diversity. We are enriched by diversity. So diversity goes both ways. We like the, maybe we really like the liberal views, and maybe somebody comes up and really, okay, they're not on board with this, but gotta honor that person too. So we're enriched by our diversity. We're enriched by different views in our world. And I think it's about honoring other people who may be different from myself, maybe think different from the way I do. But that doesn't mean that they can come and tell me that I have to be just like them, do it just like them, and they also don't have to do it just like I do. So I wanted to say that. So I really believe that bhakti is beyond all this. As I was saying before, bhakti, this idea of offering the heart, softening the heart, it's about finding the essence of living and finding the essence of loving. So today I just want to try to present a little bit of a more nuanced and broad perspective on what it means. How can we traverse the path of bhakti in America today, in Delaware? I live in Maryland. You're in Delaware. How do we do that? Like sometimes people use the term growing sea legs. So this culture came from India, right? It grew sea legs. It was brought over by, use my Guru Sri Prabhupada. Here's a bigger picture. So it was brought over by a great saint. And there are certain things that, that work here, and certain things that really don't work here. And so we have to negotiate what is the essence and what works here and what doesn't work here. Still at the same time trying to be true to the essence of what it is. So that's not easy. I'll tell you a little story actually. Srila Prabhupada wrote in his Nectar of Devotion, one of his principal books, that between different gurus and different times and places, they're, the principles are the same, but the details may be different. So, one between one guru and another, there may be different details. And so once this very lovely, wonderful man, Shuktakirti, was Prabhupada's secretary at one time, he said, Prabhupada, what is actually the difference between a principle and a detail? And Prabhupada said, that takes a little intelligence to understand. So, this is the walk, right? To try to negotiate this. How can we take the essence of bhakti into our hearts and take the deep principles into our hearts? And details may be different. The way you do it may be different from the way I do it. So I want to kind of start by telling you the story. So I became a disciple of Srila Prabhupada when I was 16 years old. And I came with a group of devotees from San Francisco to Montreal. They were on their way to London to open the London temple, to start a temple in London. And they met the Beatles and they recorded with the Beatles. And it's an amazing story. Actually, there's a great series of 3 books called Chasing Rhinos with the Swami that we highly recommend if you can get those to read. So told by one of these people who went to London. So I came with them from San Francisco. I was a hippie in San Francisco. And I came with them to Montreal to meet Srila Prabhupada, to get initiated by Srila Prabhupada, and then they were going on to London. And so the first thing Srila Prabhupada said to me one of these, Yamuna Devi, so she was, like, if you ever are in this temple, she's the one who leads those beautiful Govinda prayers that are played in the morning. So she said to Srila Prabhupada, she introduced me, she said, this is Wendy. You didn't know my name. So she said, this is Wendy. And she's only 16 years old and she would like to become your disciple. And Prabhupada's face kind of crinkled up. He said to us, where are your parents? So that was kind of funny. But the story I really wanted to tell was this one. So I was 16 years old and with Srila Prabhupada in New York City, his first temple is at 22nd Avenue, and Srila Prabhupada had a little apartment in the courtyard behind. And so one evening, a group like this, maybe even fewer people than this, he was looking at each one of us into our eyes like this, like this, like this. And he said, you want to see a picture of Prabhupada? Okay, so this is my Guru Prabhupada. And this is Nimai's Guru Vaisheshika, who's amazing. So he's my god brother. And actually I wanted to say a quote from him. He says something really wonderful about gratitude. He says, whatever you appreciate. Oh, there you are. He says, whatever you appreciate, like in the bank, appreciates. Like you put money in the bank, it appreciates, right? So he says, whatever you appreciate in your life, appreciates, grows. That's great quote. So here's a bigger Prabhupada behind with a lovely necklace or dress, which is very nice. Okay, so the story I wanted to start with is, so we're sitting in Prabhupada. Any of you 16 years old?
They are.
She
just turned 17 yesterday.
Happy birthday! Happy birthday! Any prayers and blessings? Wow. Okay, so 16 is old. Now you're 17. Okay, so I was 16 years old, and Srila Prabhupada is looking into each one of our faces, and he's saying, I want each one of you to open a temple somewhere. And he's just looking for some reciprocation. Who's going to take him up on? Who's going to take him up on this? And looking in each one of our faces. And frankly, I'm embarrassed to say this, but frankly, I was trying to get out of it. and so I just said, we called him Swamiji at that time. I said, even the girls, Swamiji. and he was totally laughing. And he's saying, yes, there is no difference between the boys and the girls. When you are teaching Krishna consciousness, there is no difference. So that was something really amazing. And then he started to talk about a great woman guru who was the leader of the whole bhakti movement in the 16th century. So here you see the person, I should use that thing. Okay, so the person in the middle is Lord Chaitanya. Just to his left is Lord Nityananda. So after the Lord Nityananda left this world, his wife Janavati Devi was leading the whole Bhakti mission, community. And she was a great guru, and we could spend the whole night telling stories about her. But anyway, so Prabhupada started talking about her, how she was a woman and how she was leading the whole Bhakti movement. So I want to tell the story. I hope I'm not going to talk too much, but today happens to be the birthday or appearance day of another great woman guru whose name was Ganga Mata Goswamini. She was called Goswamini. Right? So I want to make sure I have time at the end to talk about her. But let me say some other things first. So yeah, so Srila Prabhupada, was emphasizing, what was he saying? He was emphasizing this bhakti is for everyone. This opportunity to serve Krishna is for anyone who feels inspired to do that, for each and every one of us, no matter who we are, whatever race, whatever gender, whatever nationality, whatever religion. Right? As a matter of fact, in this bhakti movement right now, some of the initiated devotees are also practicing Mormons or practicing priests of other. Interesting, yeah. That's so interesting. And, practicing from other traditions also, Orthodox Christianity. So, some of the people in our Vaishnava Christian dialogue are worshiping on two tracks. So it's a vibrant community. It's a vibrant community of individuals, and all are meant to be honored, honor our differences, and be enriched by our differences and our different perspectives. And we need to hear all of this, I think, with a cultural and historical sensitivity, and understand in context some of the things that we hear. So I wanted to look at a verse from Bhagavad Gita that's a lot of times it's a trigger for us, and it's misunderstood. So in Bhagavad Gita, the ninth chapter is considered the essence of the whole Gita. 32nd verse. Krishna says to his dear devotee Arjuna, he says, the son of Pritha, which is a name for Arjuna, he says, those who take shelter of me, though they may be of lower birth, here's the trigger. I'll probably kick it over, so I'm going to put it over there. That's what I invariably do when someone brings it. So he says, though they may be of lower birth, women, Vaishyas, which means business people, Sudras, workers, can all attain the supreme destination. So when we hear this, we go, what? Lower birth? What's he talking about, lower birth? But what he's saying here actually is the opposite. He's saying everyone can approach. Traditionally, in India, he's saying that devotional service or serving Krishna, there's no distinction. On the path of bhakti, there's no distinction between higher and lower classes of people. And only when people are thinking materially, there are these kinds of distinctions. And he's saying everyone is eligible for the supreme destination, which is to go back to the spiritual world by the love of God. I just wanted to share a little bit from Srila Prabhupada's purport of commentary. Here's what he says. He says, it's clearly declared here that by the Supreme Lord, that in devotional service, that means serving Krishna, there's no distinction between higher and lower people. I already said this. It's only the material conception of life where there are distinctions. Then he says the process of devotional service is so strong that the pure devotee of the Supreme Lord can enable people of all classes to attain the highest destination. And this is possible when one takes shelter of Krishna, as described here. One can become much greater than the greatest scholars or yogis or meditators. You know how in the U.S., is it in the Declaration of Independence, or I think it's the Declaration of Independence, where it says all men are created equal? Well, that's only really possible spiritually. And it says men. Why does it just say men? It doesn't say women. And at the time, it was only, white men, and white men who own property, right? So it's saying they're all created equal. But in fact, when we think materially, no one is ever really equal. There's always someone who's more rich, more famous, more intellectual, more beautiful, right? No one is ever equal, materially speaking. But spiritually, the principle is that spiritually everyone is equal because every one of us has the same spirit spark, the same spirit essence within us. And not only the human beings, right? It's also on the back Bhakti path, we're meant to understand the verses in Bhagavad Gita that explain that. It's the animals too. That same spirit essence is in the heart of every living being, whether they're birds or animals or bugs. We were talking about crickets before. Crickets, Wendy goes out for her chanting japa with her bees, and these crickets jumping on her. One jumped right on her heart. It's like a heart-to-heart connection, you know? So, yeah, and then what were you telling me? There was a deer. She was out chanting. This deer was just mesmerized, you know? It was just listening to her. So that resonance is there in all living beings, and we can't discriminate between humans, but even between the animals. And that's why it's so important to respect the animals and the death of life. So, traditionally in India, these ideas coming from the literature of the Vedic literature. We use, you might hear devotees use this term, Vedic literature. Devotees say that a lot. But in the Vedas, it was a vast body of literature. It is a vast body of literature that describes martial arts and sculpture and medicine and finance and everything. You know, how to do everything included in the Vedas. Like you've probably most of you heard of Ayurveda. That's the medicine that's given in the Vedic literature. So, but traditionally, what Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad Gita is that society should be divided according to inclination. And the highest, this is what Krishna teaches in Bhagavad Gita, the highest rungs of society are supposed to be held by people who are spiritually inclined. And that's not by birth, it's by inclination of the heart, and it's by the work that someone's drawn to do. But there's a perversion of that in modern day India that it's degraded into this caste system. Maybe you're all aware of that, but there's a rigid social system without much social mobility and a lot of discrimination based on birth. So this is a perversion of the original system, okay? And traditionally, this is also really important, traditionally, the idea of self-realization was a male project. It was for the guys to go off to the forest, go off to the Himalayas, be fearless and alone. And women were pretty much practicing spiritual life at home and creating a spiritual atmosphere at home for the family, creating a spiritual hearth and home for the family. But this renunciation was really kind of a male project. So when we read these books and there are these triggers that sometimes really bug us, understand that these books are mostly written by male renunciates. These scriptures are written by male renunciates for an audience of male renunciates. And sometimes, women are considered, the temptress. That, you have to tell your story. Like when Anuttama was a brahmachari, he was a brahmachari for how many years? 10? Brahmachari for 7 years. So he was in the Denver temple. And sometimes someone would be getting married. Someone would be having a marriage ceremony. And all the brahmacharis are they're like young guys on the path of renunciation. Brahmachari means a celibate monk, right? So they're all like trying to protect their, newfound celibacy. And if somebody's getting married and they don't want to be distracted, so what do you guys do? You want to tell this story?
We would skip the wedding and read the pastimes of life. Who was famous for being tempted by a prostitute. He maintained his vows.
Yeah, so they would hide
It's a
out.
long time ago, but it's a true story.
Yeah, so we've been married for 35 years, and he was a brahmachari before that for 10 years. And so they would like hide out in the brahmachari ashram and like try to protect their celibacy by reading the story of the great Haridasa. You know, meanwhile someone's getting married and you know taking vows on the path of bhakti.
Most of those men.
And most of them. Like, you know, most of them all go sooner or later. So anyway, yeah. So the thing is, yeah. So you know, for guys like that, women, family, the idea of children and family and having a lovely what sound like a big distraction. Okay? So they have to stay focused. And sometimes there's like too much stress on knowledge and renunciation, which can be very helpful, but they're not the essence. They're not the goal of bhakti. As I said
Or
before,
self-realization.
huh?
They're not the goal of self-realization.
They're not the goal of self-realization. They're like sidebars that can be helpful. But when people become proud of being so renounced, I'm so renounced. You know? Like I remember, you know, some of these guys, oh, Lord Chaitanya, he took sannyas. Sannyas means complete lifelong renunciation. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas when he was 24. I should be able to do that when I'm not 22. You know? And so, you know, so like this infatuation with too much renunciation and pride and knowledge, these are distractions on the path of bhakti, because the goal of bhakti is to soften the heart, to offer the heart, you know. So sometimes they can be helpful, but when pride invades the heart, then they're can be very toxic. Yeah, and the path of bhakti is generally not practiced alone. It's about unique individuals, just like we have this beautiful kirtan sharing, right? It's about unique individuals coming together and sharing in community this process of kirtan, the call and response, singing Krishna's holy name, and being nurtured by that community. So I love that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about the beloved community. So that's what bhakti, in my view, is meant to be. That we're meant to be creating this beloved community that's been envisioned by many, many great social activists like Dr. Martin Luther King. So, yeah, and then the other point is that many of the greatest saints on the bhakti path have been married people with family. And in other paths of yoga, like the path of yoga, like yoga asanas, or speculative knowledge, which is called dhyana, on those paths, living with family is not allowed. That's only allowed on the path of bhakti. And then I just also wanted to say that women, generally, in ancient times and today, are often very interested in relationships, interested in creating beauty, interested in creating community, interested in creating a loving home, a beautiful environment, or creating like synergy in the workplace, right? Like, you know, sometimes women, you know, may be doing the same kind of work that men are doing, but they'd like to be doing it, exchanging with other people, talking to other people, not sitting in front of people. Creating more of a holistic. You notice that in your work environment? Yeah,
I can see that.
yeah, good. Okay. So I wanted to talk about, let's see, there's, so it's less about renunciation and more about connecting, interconnectivity, connecting, creating community. And there have been many women saints on the path of bhakti who, I was just stressing that most women would be interested in family and community and, you know, creating beauty around them. But there have also been extraordinary women who've been renunciates on the path of bhakti. And but bhakti is about realizing the intention and not the externals of the lifestyle. So I just don't want to take too much time here. So I wanted to share a couple of stories with you about this going beyond these material caste distinctions. And one is about a young boy, and it's an ancient story from the Vedas. And then another one is about a contemporary woman, a housewife living in Delaware. So let me share first of all the story about this young boy whose name was Satyakam. Satya means truth, and I'll tell you why he got that name. So he came to a great famous teacher saying he wanted to study. He asked the great guru, the great teacher, I would like to become your student. I would like to become your disciple. And as traditionally a great teacher might say, he said to the young boy, well, who is your father? So the young boy said, he was Satya, he was truthful. But the young boy said, I don't really know who my father is. I have to go ask my mother. He didn't know who his father was. So he went back to.
The party was asking who's your father to determine, because if your father's from a qualified student,
That was the implication. So he went back to ask his mother, and his mother was maybe a sex worker. Maybe she was a prostitute. And she said, I also don't know who your father is. I've had many men, and I don't know who your father is. So that he was so honest. He had the quality of honesty. So he went back to the great guru, and he said, my mother said also, she also doesn't know who my father is. And then this guru was so realized and such an actual transcendental personality. He said, I accept you as my disciple because you are so truthful. So, in other words, this is about the essence, right?
He had the qualification.
He had the qualification that you may be born from this family or that family. You may not know who your father is, but you have the qualification of this, this truth. And so you will become a very good disciple. So that's one story I wanted to share. The second story I wanted to share is about, this is a lady, her name was Kalavati, and she was the aunt of a friend of mine who's from Delhi, from India. So she was, you could say she was like an ordinary housewife from Delhi. She was a practicing, on the path of bhakti. She used to have like a little altar. She used to, this is what we do in bhakti. We go and cook something, we take it and we offer it to Krishna before eating it. So she would always do that. But she would always cook extra. And her family just they didn't take her seriously at all. She was like kind of being abused actually by her family. They didn't take her seriously. But she would always cook extra. And she would always feed the beggars of the neighborhood out the back door. And her family never knew about that. So what happened was eventually she was dying of cancer. But she was such a very pure-hearted devotee. So she's dying of cancer and her family's there with her. And she's saying, while she's dying, she's saying, I see it. Have you heard me tell this? She's saying, I see it. I see God's chariot. I see Krishna's chariot coming for me. So you know that like black gospel song, swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. So Krishna has a chariot, and I guess God in the West has a chariot too. And so she's seeing God coming for her on his chariot. Nobody else is seeing it. She's seeing it. So it's so super ecstatic. So then they had the funeral ceremony, and they're having the funeral ceremony, and the family's all there. She died. They're having the funeral ceremony, and they're all these like kind of scruffy looking people there, and the family's kind of looking around like, who are all these people? Like, we don't know you. What are you doing here? And then after the ceremony was over, all these beggar people came. Really cracks me up. These beggars came forward to me and they said, you never knew, but Antipa's always feeding us for so many years. She was feeding us out the back door. So she was loving God, but she was also loving all the people and serving them. So this is bhakti. So I wanted to share that story with you. Another story, there was one. So this guru of mine, he's really, really into distributing Prabhupada's books. So in the, he's like the great acharya of distributing books. So in the 1970s, there was a lady, American lady in Los Angeles. She was like the greatest book distributor, and she was like magical. Whatever she said to people, they would always take one of Prabhupada's books. And so Prabhupada wanted to see her, and he asked if she would come to speak. And he was so curious to know what was she saying to people. What did the people say when they received the book? And so he told her at that time that the women in this Krishna consciousness movement are Lord Chaitanya's secret weapons for sharing his mission. So that was really special. There's another story. If we have time later, I can share that also. So, but then, sometimes the things Prabhupada says, because Prabhupada has very traditional values, right? He was born, we say he appeared in 1896. So that's like well over 100 years ago. So he had very traditional values. And sometimes he would say, like you might read in Srila Prabhupada's books that he says women are less intelligent. Anybody read that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's like a big trigger for us, right? So in the lexicon of Srila Prabhupada, or in the dictionary of Srila Prabhupada, what does he mean by less intelligent? He uses words in a very special way that we have to understand. Srila Prabhupada defines intelligence in his Bhagavad Gita, one of his reports, Bhagavad Gita. He says, intelligence means to understand what is matter, what is spirit, and who is the controller of both. This is how he defines intelligence. So, and he has very strong language for materialistic people, who maybe you might have also read. Prabhupada calls materialistic men dogs, hogs, camels, and asses. Prabhupada, you have to be so heavy. So he has strong words for materialistic men. He has strong words for materialistic women, and high praise for women who have developed themselves spiritually on the path of bhakti, and men also. I'll tell you another story. So we have a god brother. He's no longer living. He was a very, very great personality. He was born in the slums of Cleveland, African American. He had to, in his neighborhood, Bhakti Tirtha Swami, if you've heard his name. In his neighborhood, he had to carry a gun just to live in that neighborhood. And he was a child evangelist. He was extraordinary. And his mother, he was from such a poor family that his mother, if there was a boy who had less than he had, his mother would give away his clothes to that boy. So, and his mother was a really great Christian woman, like a tremendously faithful Christian. So anyway, he became a disciple of Srila Prabhupada at one point. And at one point, he came to Srila Prabhupada and he said, Srila Prabhupada, do you know that there is racism in your Krishna consciousness movement? He was like calling it out, because that's how he was. He was like, it was amazing. There's a beautiful book about him. If you want to read it, it's called Black Lotus. Another wonderful book you can get. So he said that to Prabhupada, do you know that there's racism in the Krishna consciousness movement? And Srila Prabhupada said yes. And if you are disturbed by it, then you're no better than they are. Which is like, what? I've been an activist all my life, and you're telling me if I'm disturbed by this, I'm no better than they are, And so in other words, what was he saying? He's saying, if you think that you're the material body, you are less intelligent. If you think you're black or white or American or a man or a woman, you are a fool. This is Prabhupada's language. You think you're the material body, you're a fool. Another story that's similar, my god sister Vishaka, a brilliant woman. She won awards for her photography. She did a lot of the films that you see in temples. She's written many books. So Srila Prabhupada, Vishaka went to Prabhupada and asked, why do you say that women are less intelligent? And his reply was very similar. If you think you are a woman, you are less. And what does the Bhagavad Gita say? That those who are wise see themselves as soul, spirit essence. And they don't get tangled up in the illusion of the external coverings, right? Like the body is like a dress, the mind is like lingerie. It's a little more subtle, but it's still not me. Okay? So, I just want to make sure I have enough time. So whether we have the external dress of a woman or a man, I am less intelligent than I think I am in the body. So the point is that, and also it says in the Srimad Bhagavatam that everyone born in this Kali Yuga, this fallen age we're in right now, everyone is less intelligent born in this age. Kalo Sudra Sambhava. That means everyone is born as a less intelligent person in this age of pride. So don't be proud whoever you are, because pride is the killer of devotion. So let me share another story. Am I way over time? Am I doing all right? Okay.
Yeah, we have some more time. I do want to do time for a question.
Okay, so I'm just gonna skip some of my thoughts, but I do want to share this one, a couple more things, and then I want to share this story of Gangamata Goswami. So let me share this other story. So in the Calcutta temple a number of years ago, it was very crowded, and there were men and women devotees living there. As a matter of fact, people had to walk through the women's ashram to get to something else. It was super crowded, and so Prabhupada was out. Huh? To get to the men's, is that what it was? Yeah. So in other words, it was bad.
Not necessarily through the shower, but at least you have to go through that order.
Yeah, so Prabhupada used to walk in the morning, he used to take a morning walk. And so he went out for a walk one morning with all the men. And meanwhile, the women are back at the temple, dressing the deities, cooking the breakfast, cleaning Prabhupada's room, doing everything. And the men are enjoying a lovely walk with Srila Prabhupada. And while they're out walking with Srila Prabhupada, they're complaining to him, there's no room in this temple for these women. We gotta get these women out of here. They're just agitating us. You know, we don't want to be seeing women all the time. You know, and they're just complaining about the women in the temple. Gotta get them out of here. And Srila Prabhupada didn't say a word. The whole walk, he didn't say one word. And so when they got back to the temple after the walk, the ladies who've been doing everything were like standing on the side of the stairs with their hands folded to greet Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada looked at them, and then he looked at the men, and he said, but if you associate with these women, you will go back to Godhead, back to the spiritual world. And he just walked back into his room. Yeah, so let's see, I have to cut this short. So I just want to say, one other thing I wanted to say is, in the earliest Upanishad, which is called the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it describes the story of a brahmavadani, which means a Brahman spiritually realized woman scholar whose name is Gargi. And she was a lifelong celibate. She successfully debated the great sage Yajnavalkya in the court of King Janaka, who was the father of Sita Devi. And this was thousands of years ago in the Treta Yuga. And some people say that she wrote some of the verses of the Rig Veda. So, and they also wanted to say that one of the most technical parts of the Bhagavatam is Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya philosophy in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is spoken by the incarnation and great saint Kapila Dev to his mother Devahuti. So if women can't study the Vedas, why is he wasting his time speaking this very technical part of Vedic knowledge to his mother? Why would he waste his time, right? So I'm just skipping. So I just want to, now I want to tell the story of this birthday today from the Mata Goswami. So it's quite long, and I'm going to skip over lots of the parts, but basically she was born a princess in Bengal. Her father was a king. And she had no interest in being a princess. All she wanted to do was study. She was studying, and then she started studying spiritual things. She was completely immersed in spiritual things. And then it came time for her marriage, and her parents were very, typical India, right? Very stressed out. Who's she going to marry? We have to find a suitable boy. And she said, look, I'm not going to marry any mortal person. I'm just going to marry God, Krishna. I'm not marrying any material. So her parents got totally frustrated, and finally they just died. You know, they couldn't get they couldn't get her to marry. So here she is. She's inherited this whole kingdom. She's supposed to be ruling the kingdom, and she just tells the relatives, "I'm going to go on holy pilgrimage to visit a few holy places," and she just left and never came back. And so then her relatives were faced with ruling this kingdom. So what happened was. She had this, so if you look in the kitchen, I'm looking right at Lord Jagannath. Are many of you familiar with this deity of Lord Jagannath? He's worshipped in the holy city of Puri. So she had a dream. Lord Jagannath came to her in a dream and told her to go to Vrindavan. So she went to, this is the place of Krishna, Krishna's place where
On the other
Krishna,
side of it.
on the other side of India where Krishna had all his pastimes as a child and as a youth. And so she had this dream, Jagannath told her to go to Vrindavan. So she goes to Vrindavan, she meets her guru there, his name was Haridas Pandit. And he's thinking, come on, how's a princess gonna be able to do bhakti, live a life of renunciation? And so he was testing her. He was saying, come on, you're a princess. You can't be like a poor devotee just living in Vrindavan. He's saying it's not possible for the daughter of a king to live in Vrindavan as a poor devotee, just absorbed in chanting and bhajan and with not much to eat and no comforts. It would be better for you to stay at home and worship Krishna at home. And she knew she was being tested. Right? So she didn't listen to any of the discouraging talk. And she had, talk about renunciation and austerity. She was just like fixed. This is what she was going to do. And she, she gave up her opulent dresses and jewelry, and she was just living like a very poor person in Vrindavan. And finally, her guru was like, "Okay, you're doing it." And then he had another woman disciple, Lakshmi Devi, and the two of them, he told Lakshmi Devi to go and, you two can have association. They used to chant, they lived at Radhakund, which is the holy place in Vrindavan. And they used to chant 192 rounds every day, which is like, whoa, And so then, but the part I'm trying to get to here is that, so then her guru gave her an order that she should go to live, she was back to the other side of India, to Jagannath Puri. He told her to go to Puri, live there for the rest of your life. One of the great devotees of Lord Chaitanya, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, all these great devotees had passed away from the world. He told her, go there, live in his house. His house was falling apart. No one was worshiping the deity there. He told her to go there. And so what happened was, so she goes there, I'm skipping a lot of parts, right? And so she went there on the order of her guru. He told her not to leave. And then, so today is her birthday, or we say a birthday, but it's also the day of worshiping the Ganges. So today is the day that the Ganges, who was another goddess, right? The rivers in India are considered goddesses. So anyway, she became overwhelmed with this desire to go bathe in the Ganges. But her guru had told her never to leave Puri. But there's a little pond in Puri, I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but there's a little pond that's called Sweta Ganga. It's called the White Ganga. It's like a little kind of bathing thing. Anyway, so what happened was she had this desire to leave and go take bath in the Ganga. And the Ganga didn't flow there. But what happened was this pond over flooded, and there was a gigantic flood, and everybody was getting washed by this flood. Everyone's like bathing, and they're realizing that this is the Ganges has come there to Puri, and they're all in ecstasy. And what happened was, so this is the mystic thing, very mystical story. She got washed in this flood right into the temple of Jagannath in the middle of the night. And what happened was these pujaris there, even today, they're super aggressive. Like if you are not the right anything, they will just smack you, Anyway, so she gets washed up into the temple, and they're like, "What are you doing here? You're some kind of a thief. How did you get in here?" And they put her in the dungeon. And they just put her in the dungeon. She broke into the temple in the middle of the night. You must be trying to steal the Lord's jewelry. And so she's in the dungeon. And then what happened was the king had a dream that you get her out of that dungeon. And you better also take initiation from her. And if those priests of your temple, want anything good for themselves, they should also take initiation from her. So the king woke up from his dream. What's this? She's in the dungeon. He had already actually had some interactions with her and had respected her and given her a little house. Anyway, so he wakes up from this dream and he gets her out of the dungeon, and he surrenders at her feet. She put her hand on his head, and then on a special auspicious day he became her. And these pujaris, it's called pujaris, the people who do your pujari, right? So they're the ones who do the arti. They offer the incense and the flowers and offer the worship. So they're from the highest caste of Brahmins. So all these pujaris bowed down at her feet, and they all became her. And then her name was Sachi. I don't know if I mentioned her name was Sachi. So then after all of these miracles happened, she got the name Ganga Mata, Goswami. And she's her birthday there on the Vaishnava calendar. But so, yeah. So those are some of the things I wanted to say. I hope we didn't talk your ears off. And it's okay. Thank you. I just wanted to give like a more nuanced perspective because sometimes, you know, we hear from the side of the renunciates. And so here's a women's, but it's still all authorized talk. So Nima, what do we do? Do we have a kirtan or do we have questions now?
I got questions.
Okay, so
Thank you so much.
thank you for inviting us. And you know, reflections, what was important to you, what bothered you, anything you'd like to share, or if you have any questions or any triggers, or you know, maybe this was radical and maybe this is not what you've been hearing around, you know, Delaware. But you needed it. Oh, I needed it. Thank you. Well, you know, I mean, one of the parts I didn't get to talk about because I had so many thoughts, but you know, there have been women gurus on the path of bhakti. Some of them have been extraordinarily prominent, great mystical personalities, like the story I just told. Some of them were just like smaller teachers, but I counted the ones we know about. I counted 34 between the time of Lord Chaitanya. So Lord Chaitanya's great associate, Advaita Acharya, he's on the our left here. His wife was a great guru. She had disciples. So from his time to the time of Prabhupada's guru's father, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, from that time until his time, which was like 1890s, early 1900s, I counted 34 that we know about. So it's not as though women haven't been gurus, haven't been great teachers. A lot of times they're just like family doctors. So what are your questions? What are your thoughts? What was important? What was troubling? What was a trigger? Do you think that was one?
So I shouldn't think of myself as a man, just as like a soul who's trying to get back to Krishna. Gender doesn't really matter.
Beautiful. Thank you, Christine.
Okay, so that's the point we were trying to make. Okay, well, I wanted that.
Because if I'm proud of being a man, or if I'm proud of being a woman, or I'm proud of being anything,
That's going to be pride to take you away from Krishna.
pride is the killer. You know, like I love this. The Archbishop of Canterbury, another great Christian person, said, how does it put it? Gratitude is the soil in which pride does not easily grow. Don't you love that? Gratitude is a soil, a rich soil. Where's the gardener? Where's Nicole? Where's she? So you want to have rich soil. And gratitude is very much a part of bhakti because it's about humility, recognizing that everything I have has come to me as a gift. That's humility. And then if I think, whatever gifts I've received, I have to offer them back to the giver, right? That's bhakti. So that gratitude piece, it's like there between humility and love. And there's no question of love without that. So what else? I could talk about. What are your thoughts? What was troubling you? Or what was important for you? What was a trigger? What was
I've always, been involved in, how guys will get their, get their man cave or get their, and if there's no woman out there, not going to be. Like, they're going to be right there, where women have this, the divine feminine is a connection.
interconnection?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And without that interconnectivity, the world wouldn't work.
It's so true. Actually, a man who lives at Gita Nagari, one of our communities, I gave a class for that community a few weeks ago, and he said, before I came to Krishna consciousness, I always wondered if God was a man or a woman, but I concluded that God was a woman because otherwise there'd be no flowers, there'd be no rainbows. Yeah, Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There'd be no socks like that, right? And then I have to share this other story. So this story is, I'm not going to say who it was, but it was another man, renunciate, one of the gurus in the Krishna consciousness movement. He tells the story, this is really sweet. He tells the story that when he was a little boy, his parents were organizing a birthday party for him. And they only invited the boys in the class. And he told his parents, if you don't invite the girls, the boys won't come. So that's coming from a renunciate. So, what else? What else was disturbing or helpful? Or what's a takeaway for you? What will you remember later? What's the question? Yes.
One thing I think is definitely a takeaway for me, and also I want to thank you so much. It was
Thank you.
such a wonderful talk.
Uh,
I think, I've only been studying Bhakti, sort of exclusively for the past maybe year and a half, 2 years, where I feel like I've really put myself 100% in. And, there's so much to learn, so much. I mean, but I have to say, listening to you speak tonight, I felt sort of a liberation and a freeness sort of open and like a relaxation, because I feel like, I've been taking this all very seriously, which I should, which we want to. But I think hearing so much from the renunciate point of view, and maybe not being able to relate as much to some of the gurus, and actually being sort of intimidated, this made me aware of the softness, right? I mean, because when we think of Radha, when we think of beautiful goddesses, there is that softness. And, I think I'm becoming more aware that I need to know more of that to incorporate with the other to sort of form a better unity for me, like a less intimidating mood.
Thank you so much. So I was saying that in the beginning, bhakti is a softening of the heart, an offering. So our hearts become very hard, like this with pride. When I think I'm so this and that, I'm such a great speaker, I'm such a great dancer, I'm such a great mridanga player, I'm such a great something, I'm such a brilliant, and that's like, it's like door slam. And then until our hearts open to some humility, it's like and so often, our pride comes when we on the path of religion, or so many, such a fall down. It's not only on the bhakti path, but on all paths. When you have pride in all the spiritual traditions. You have pride in people who aren't spiritual. You have pride in people who are spiritual. It's like part of the material world, right? Yeah. So what's the difference? If we want to go to that spiritual world, we have to go through that vehicle. That's what the world's about. That's where we leave the material world. It's not about externals. It's about intention and love. And who do you love? Is that yours?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's like 100 years ago. Temporary music. We need my granddaughters here to tell you something. But yeah, who do you love? And that's to offer us to the source of life, to the reservoir. What else? Questions?
So thank you for being here, and I'm sorry I'm babysitting.
They're great.
But I guess so. Before I came here, and a little now, I'm not gonna lie. So I'm a recovering addict, and I didn't have a really good life. But when I opened my eyes and had my daughter, because she saved my life, I start worrying about her, and I start worrying about our country. And you said, nobody help. I'll have this last years like out of my country where I'm from, and I'm really afraid to lose the freedom. And so I've been here for a year, and I haven't been worried about it as much or looking as much of the news and all that. And but it scares me because like, I'm glad I bring my daughter here, but if we lose our freedom, what if we can't do this? Which scares me.
Well, we were over in Lewis before, and my husband loves history, and we were looking at some of the historical sites. And there was a community of Dutch Mennonites who were in Lewis, Delaware for 2 years. And it said on the signs that they had a communistic, they were like the early Christians. They were living, from each according to their means, to each according to their means. Living in community, interdependent. And then after 2 years, somebody just like, we have the name of the guy. I mean, we wanted to know more of that history, but yeah,
So
so
fear. I'm in a lot of fear sometimes because as the time starts changing, things are going on, and it fears me a lot. So
we have
it's
to
my
take.
heart a lot.
In India, they call this when you put your 2 hands together. This is called Anjali, and this is how they worship the Ganges. When they'll take the water of the Ganges like this and offer that water back to the Ganges. So, like, I got this water from the Mother Ganges, and I offer it back. So take that fear and put it in your Anjali, and just you have to stop and pause. So I'm not saying stuff it down. I'm saying stop and pause and recognize, like you are right now, recognizing. Take a deep breath and pause. Put it in your Anjali and just offer it at the lotus feet of Krishna or divinity by any name you want. And just say, I'm a mother, and I'm an American right now, temporary designation, but I'm worried about my country. I'm worried about, the children in this country, how they grow up. Right? So just put your fear, just put it in the heart, and say, I'm your child, my daughter is your child, please use it. That's what I would because we're small and we're limited. We want to be able to protect. We want to be able to, we're so small. So Krishna is the one who can do it. You ever hear the story of Draupadi? Draupadi, that's a long story that he might But anyway, the end of the story is that she was seeing that she couldn't protect her. Someone was trying to strip her naked. Someone's trying to, in a big assembly of a bunch of strong guys, a bunch of warriors, they're trying to strip. They lost. Yeah, she was like lost in a gambling bet. Talk about addiction. So she's lost in a bet. The winners are trying to strip her naked. She's trying to keep all on. She's a small woman. These are all big warriors trying to pull up. And so she's just trying her best. And she looks at all these so-called, cultured men of Dharma who were there. She's looking and no one could protect her. And then she's just like, okay, she's a devotee. She's just only Krishna can protect me. So instead of trying to keep her clothes on with her limited strength, she just put her arms in the air. And sometimes you see this in an Indian dance. It's stunning. She's calling out, hey Krishna, here you go. And she's calling out to Krishna. And then what happens? Krishna like incarnated, sorry. And they're like pulling. And she's spinning, you've seen this bit, and she's spinning around and they're trying to disrobe her, see her naked beauty. And this big pile of cloth on the floor, and this big strong he-man is like sweating like God. So that's what we have to do. Because we're small, we're limited, we have our power, but our power is limited. What else? Any other thoughts? Wow. That's bhakti. What else? Questions or comments or what's an important takeaway? Yes.
I guess this is for either of you. So I also new to this as it relates to the mind. So I've read through at least once, as it is. I've read more than one work by Srila Prabhupada, but chanting, the chant from my, I come from sort of Western intellectual church, which I know he addresses, but the act of what does it mean? What is this from? What is the end? Like the simple act of the repetition at home. I live alone. I'm myself single. So it's so deceptively simple that because it causes me to question my being prior to. I'm like, these are theistic. I was, I think it's here might become more of Buddhism prior to early ancient India. So like these are theistic Buddhists, right? But I come from a Roman Catholic tradition. My mother does the Marian thing, but that used to get on my nerves. Like, it would like to pray for me would not like sort of like a vampire and garlic or so if you have any advice, it's like it's deceptively simple.
And actually you're quoting Prabhupada right now, because Prabhupada said bhakti is so simple that you can miss it. Because when we're so intellectual, how could this be real? This is just so simple. And then he said something really funny, that there's 2 ways to touch the nose. Like this. So, bhakti is deceptively simple. And that, what your mother offering her heart, it's deceptively simple. And it's like, how could a big intellectual guy or a woman also think that this is the real thing because this is so simple? But it's another Prabhupada quote. Bhakti is simple for the simple, but it's very hard for the crooked. So we have.
That's true.
So we have. No, so we have to become simple. Like, what did Jesus Christ say? He said, the little child shall lead you. Become like a little child. So these are the deep truths that are so. And it's not as though you won't find head-cracking intellectual scholarship on the path of bhakti. You want to read. Okay, so we have a friend, a godbrother, who he did his PhD thesis from Oxford University on one verse of the writings of Jiva Goswami, who wrote 400,000 Sanskrit verses. You can crack your head over this stuff. And he did a PhD thesis on one of his verses. So if you want that, you can find it. But the conclusion, you got something in the heart.
Say, in this era where like even my cars wired, there's advertising everywhere. You have a compassion, which I haven't. I've met some of like Buddhists, even the exiled ones, a long time ago. But it's harder in the United States to go anywhere to discover that. I think especially where like churches are and things like this. Oh, this is what this is about. This isn't about becoming isolationist Zen master or something. This is
Maybe you're just overthinking it. Saying Hare Krishna.
That was great.
There's a very but there's a very important verse.
I didn't go to school that long.
There's a very important verse by one of the great followers of Lord Chaitanya, where he says, very humbly, he says, "Oh wise men of learning, apply your logic and your reasoning to the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and you will find something astounding." So in other words, you don't just stuff it, you don't throw it away and say, well, I'm going to follow the path of bhakti and become like a bhakti dummy. No, some of the greatest intellectuals that have ever lived have been scholars on the path of bhakti. They've written hundreds of Sanskrit verses that, like, again, you can just crack your head of reading them. So, so apply your logic, use your intellectualism, apply your logic, apply your reasoning to the mercy of this path of bhakti, to the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, to the mercy of the holy name of Krishna, and see if you don't find something. because you. I hope that's.
Thank
Okay. Yes.
And what I take away is I feel I love the story that you told when you
Oh, I
getting
love
people out the back door for the sheer fact of some of the things, I feel like my path in Bhakti has been that. What it's done is make all of the other services I do, it's this other place of beauty. We talked about my walk, but even that, where I never have to be more and more I actually chant. And I too am an intellect. I too somebody who studies, and how could it be so simple as wrapping my keys and the idea of offering it, just offering it. Thank you so much for that perspective too, of hearing so much from renunciants and really understanding that there's this lush place that is missed. Push towards that because there's somewhere else that really, I feel like I'm grateful for finding you. It changed everything. So much for all the classes that you give and all the work that you do, and you're just a sincerity. And that idea of the more I practice, it's less about trying to fit myself into this mold. It's trying out of my heart, however that is.
That's right. Whatever gifts.
Whatever
you
that
have.
looks like, and however that's right. And I love how you said if we're born in this day and age, of course we're all fallen. There is that idea that once you come to a devotee, I spent my entire life fighting for that, so it's been a quite yet I've always from a young age part of what
Saw yourself
as just a spirit soul, and what actually got me kind of like up in arms about women's rights is that I saw it all as that, and then that's not how the world saw me, and so that became really confusing. And
So, those of us who love diversity, when we hear someone's diversity come up, we can just back up a bit and say, yes, I want your perspective is very different from mine. I want to be the way I am. And when we meet someone who's maybe reaching out the path of maybe we meet a very uptight brahmachari or sannyasi, and it's like, okay, people, just be blessed. Be blessed on your path. Take further steps, and I honor you. And and as a woman, I'm not here to do that. I'm not here to harm you. I sometimes have to honor you just for a little distance. Because like we're human beings, we're individuals. Not everybody's going to resonate. Like there's probably tons of people who think what I said tonight is totally off the wall. And how dare you? So, but we have to hear from those people that will spark your heart. Like someone will spark your heart and inspire you. So hear from those people where. And there's always some, even it's not so nice to go to classes or to listen, in the morning. Bhakti Center has these classes. And you know what? When you listen, it's always wonderful. Even if the rest is like, there's always something. Anything else before we? Oh, sorry. Oh, then.
So grateful. My reflections, Yeah, well, I've just been like feeling this like pain in my heart for months now. And I feel like nothing is seeming out of position, but like I can see myself in it somewhere and I can hear myself in it. So basically you speaking here is just like
Well, allow yourself to shine. No matter who we are, our playing small does not serve the world, right? So whatever gifts you have, those are given by Krishna. Use them for Krishna, and don't let anyone tell you. But you can put discretion. It's not be like, no. Yeah, thank you so much.
saying that you've got to talk or listening to is one word we can grab. And I think that for the last several weeks now, we've been really focusing on reminding ourselves bhakti is love based and not rule based. It's love based and not rule based. And so many times I think before we started emphasizing this, I was listening to talks. Yes, so words of be uplifting, but at the same time, your ears like, yep, throwing the whole thing out. Yep, you know, so it's so important to your entire perspective is helpful. Keep reiterating that. We have to get to the essence. We have to keep coming back to the essence, and everyone has a different path. Everyone has a different personality, and sometimes at first, you know, it's a washing away of personality. It's a washing away of the individuality, and the more it's completely the opposite of that, and it's completely with this. How I continue to serve and to love. So,
Beautiful. You know, this great sadhu again, Vaisheshekar, he loves to quote Srila Prabhupada, where Prabhupada said, Bhakti is meant to be individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. In his community out there in California, Silicon Valley, he calls it ISB, individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. Because we're all individuals and we have different things to inspire us. And if I can take one more minute? Okay. You mentioned Buddhism, and this beautiful man who's no longer sitting in this chair was mentioning Buddhism.
easier.
Okay. So I want to share with you, there's a story I love from a great Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. Maybe you've read some of it. He's a wonderful teacher. So you reminded me by what you're saying of this beautiful example that he gives. He says, he calls the garden. He says, if you're growing lettuce, you know, and the lettuce doesn't grow properly, you don't blame the lettuce. He says, you know, you think, well, maybe there was too much rain this year, maybe there was too much sun, maybe I didn't properly aerate the soil. You know, you try to figure it out. But we don't do that in our relationships. We go, you stupid, your mom, right? Of course you don't do this. You stupid kid. You're never going to amount to anything. You know, you lettuce, you're never going to amount to a good salad. I mean, come on, you know? And I think it's in the Bible. It says something about every child has or maybe this is from Islam. Every child has an angel over it saying, grow, grow, grow. You know, so we have to feel like that for each other and for ourselves. You know, be the angel. Grow, grow. You're going to be a beautiful salad.